Hello everybody and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You are here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and we have Jump Scare Precon Upgrade Guide today. This deck got spoiled early compared to the other ones, so I wanted to get a video talking about this quickly to kind of see what the playstyle of this is, assess the deck, and add some cards that I think would be fun to include. So let's start out by looking at the two commanders. Of course, the face commander is Duskmourn, Mystery Unraveler. 2 green and blue, legendary creature, human wizard with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, manifest dread. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, otherwise, you may turn a permanent you control face up. So Manifest Dread is a new form of Manifest that lets you look at the top 2 cards of your library. One of them goes onto the battlefield and the other one goes into your graveyard. There's still a 2/2 creature that, like Manifest of the past, can be turned up anytime for its mana cost, if it's a creature card. So I really like this. You're obviously going to be focusing around playing a ton of lands and then using that value to cheat things into play by playing additional lands or having lands enter, allowing you to flip them over. This deck does a very good job of doing that, and honestly, this is an amazing deck list. I think there's a lot of really fun stuff in here, and this is definitely the commander you want to play. But let's look at the co-commander for this, because I think it's very interesting and has an important kind of part of the story. We have Kian, Corrupted Memory, 2 green and blue, legendary creature, Illusion. As long as Kian's power is even, you may cast non-creature spells as though they have flash. And as long as Kian's power is odd, you may cast creature spells as long as they have flash. So basically, you're getting to cast non-creature on even and creatures on odd, and then whenever you draw, put a +1/+1 counter on Kian. Very, very good, actually. You know, look at this. It's only 4 mana, but you're going to be drawing a ton of cards, putting a ton of counters on this. So whether or not you play this in the deck, you know, I don't think matters too much. I think it's quite good. This deck doesn't necessarily revolve around card draw as much as some other Simic decks do, so I might not include this. But this is a very fun card that I think you could build a very cool deck. Not sure exactly how you can balance it reliably, but it's fun. So let's take a look at the new cards, and I believe we have 9 new cards, which I didn't expect. But we have Crackling Counterpart, Curator Beastie, and Disorienting Choice. So Crackling Counterpart says create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and you can flash back for 7 to do it again. So that seems pretty great. Curator Beastie, 4 green, creature beast with reach. Colorless creatures you control enter with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on them, which is very nice. And when it enters or attacks, you manifest dread. So right there, whenever this enters and you make a manifest token, it's just going to be a 4/4 right off the bat. Disorienting Choice, 3 and a green sorcery. For each opponent, choose up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. For each permanent chosen this way, its controller may exile it. Then, if 1 or more of those chosen permanents are still in the battlefield, you search your library for up to that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tap, then shuffle. So you're either forcing your opponents to sacrifice their artifacts or enchantments, or you just get to search for lands. Basic, not basics, any land you want. So I would be a little scared if somebody was playing this in a deck that really had a nice land base, because you could get some really, really powerful cards out with Disorienting Choice. But next up, we have a new room being added to this deck with Experimental Lab and Staff Room. Then we have Giggling Skitter Spike and Glitch Interpreter. So Experimental Lab and Staff Room here. Experimental Lab, 3 and a green. When you unlock this door, manifest dread, then put 2 +1/+1 counters and trample counter on that creature, which is very nice. But Staff Room for 2 and a green. When a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, turn that creature face up or put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is either just going to put +1/+1 counters when they deal combat damage on our stuff, or help flip them over, or both. This is a pretty great card. I'm glad that this is a commander only card, because this seems very powerful. And a lot of the second abilities, and I don't know if there's any order to the madness of these, usually seem more expensive, but this one's actually cheaper and the first ability is more expensive, so I think both of these are pretty powerful in this deck. But then we have Giggling Skitter Spike, 4 mana artifact creature toy with Indestructible. This kind of looks like the baby head from Toy Story with like the spider legs. I don't know. That's kind of what it reminds me of. This is Indestructible. When it attacks, blocks, or becomes a target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent, which is very cool, whether you're targeting it or your opponents are. But for 5 mana, you can make it Monstrosity for 5, meaning you're going to put 5 +1/+1 counters on this, meaning that anytime it attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it's going to deal 6 damage to your opponents. So that's even better. This is a pretty cool card. We haven't gotten any of these like Indestructible toy type cards for a while, so I'm very excited to see new ones of these. And then Glitch Interpreter, creature, human, wizard, with when it enters, if you control no face down permanents, return it to its owner's hand and manifest dread. So this is a great way you can continually manifest dread. But whenever one or more colorless creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card, which is great because we're going to have a number of these at any one point, and our opponents probably are not going to want to block them because we could flip them up at any time, and you know, they might be taking a lot more damage than they expect. So this is wonderful. And the last 3 new cards we're talking about are Shriekwood Devourer. It came from the pipes in Zimon's Hypothesis. So Shriekwood Devourer, 5 green, pretty expensive tree folk with trample. When you attack with one or more creatures, untap up to X lands, where X is the greatest power among those creatures. Awesome. This is an awesome card. This doesn't have to attack for you to untap those. Untapping lands and having them during your second main phase is a very broken ability. So I think Shriekwood Devourer here is going to go in a lot of big stuff green decks, letting you just ramp even quicker. It came from the pipes is next. 4 in a blue enchantment. When they came from the pipes enters, manifest dread twice. Then whenever a face down creature you control enters, draw a card. Right off the bat, we're going to play this. We're going to get 2 things onto the battlefield and then draw 2 cards, and continue to do that every turn while we have Zimone Mystery Unraveler played and have landfall triggers. So I very much enjoy that. And then Zimone's Hypothesis, 3 blue instant. You may put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, then choose odd or even. Return each creature with power of the chosen quality to its owner's hand. 0 is even. This is very fun. Whether we have a lot of manifest tokens on the board or we have a lot of other big stuff, we can just make that decision and choose what we want to bounce to our hand or not. This might also be very powerful if you manifest dread a ton of cards you can't flip over, and in that case you can return them to your hand and then you'll be able to cast them from your hand, whether they're instant sorceries, enchantments, artifacts, you know, anything but a creature. So a very cool play strategy there. But now let's look at some cards I think you should swap out. But before we do so, I would just like to say, please consider subscribing. That would mean the world to me. So I'm being specific here, talking about cards to swap out, because I really like this deck. I think you could probably cut 1 or 2 cards from this deck, or if you really want to upgrade it, you know, you could really go through and cut. But I think they did a very good job, whoever designed this deck. You're doing exactly what you want to do. You're playing a ton of lands. You have a ton of creatures that care about landfall. You have a ton of creatures that allow you to get lands, whether it's their activated ability or enter the battlefield ability or whatever. This is a very nice deck, and I applaud whoever built this because I think it's going to be extremely fun out of the box. But if you want to go a different route in this deck, revolving more around the manifest creatures and looking at some other manifest and morph options, that's what I'm going to talk about now. We're going to look at those colorless creatures. We're going to care about those. So let's start out by looking at Chrome Shell Crab, Den Protector, and Fathom Seer. Chrome Shell Crab, 4 in a blue. Crab Beast with morph for 4 in a blue, but when it is turned face up, you may exchange control of target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls. So essentially with Zimone on the battlefield, if you play a land and this is a morph creature, you can turn it face up. When you do, you just get to exchange control, whether that's their commander, a really powerful piece. Guess what? They get a 3/3 crab and you get their best thing. So I think this is very nice. Den Protector here, 1 in a green. Creatures with power less than Den Protector's power can't block it. Now this is one of those cards you can megamorph, so it's very nice because you get to put counters on it. It gets bigger. And when this is turned face up, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Just a great way to get some stuff back from your graveyard. And then Fathom Seer, I think this is very good, especially in this deck. But for 1 in a blue, you get a creature illusion with morph, return 2 islands you control to their owner's hand. And when this is turned face up, draw 2 cards. We are going to want to play a ton of lands, so being able to bounce lands back to our hands to play them again is very good, especially when it works very well with our deck strategy. Next up, we have Forsaken Monument, Kozilek, the Broken Reality, and Corrosin Cloud Scrapper. So Forsaken Monument, obviously here, is great because we're going to be creating a ton of colorless cards. So 5 generic artifact, 5 generic legendary artifact, colorless creatures you get +2/+2. When you tap a permanent for colorless, you get an additional colorless, and when you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. Now, there are some colorless cards in here. Of course, we have artifacts. Of course, we have some more cards we're including in this deck that are colorless. There aren't a ton of them, so really you're just playing this for the buff, making all of your creatures a little bigger. Whether or not you keep this in is debatable, but I think it's pretty good for 5 mana just to buff up all of your morph and manifest creatures. But Kozilek, the Broken Reality, 9 generic mana, legendary creature Eldrazi. When you cast a spell, up to 2 target players each manifest 2 cards from their hands. For each card manifested this way, you draw a card. Then, other colorless creatures you control get +3/+2. This is much better, obviously, than Forsaken Monument, but it costs a lot. But you know what would be even better if you don't care about the first part of this card is playing it through manifesting or manifest dread and then flipping it over and buffing up all your other colorless creatures. You know, that's where you're going to take advantage of these really big creatures. And looking at really big creatures, we have Krosan Cloud Scrapper, 7 green, 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 creature beast mutant. With at the beginning of your upkeep, sack it unless you pay 2 green, and you could morph it for 7 and 2 green. So obviously, if we can cheat this in, that's what we want to do. And you can just play this for 3 mana, flip it over for free with our commander, and you get a 13/13 that if you want to sack it, you can sack it, but if you want to keep it, hey, that's a nice creature to keep around. Very similarly, we have Corrosive Colossus, Primal Whisperer, and Root Elemental. So Corrosive Colossus, 6 green, green, green with morph for 6 green, green, and it's a 9/9, just a big creature you're going to want to cheat in for free. Primal Whisperer, 4 and a green creature elf soldier with it gets +2/+2 for each face down creature in play, which I think is very interesting because I believe that works with manifest. If those creatures are face down that we can manifest and they're not like an artifact, instant sorcery, whatever, you know, this should count them, I believe. So this could be a very large card at some point. And then Root Elemental, 4 green, green with morph for 5 green, green, but when it's turned face up, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, and that's pretty great. Whether it's just a value piece or, you know, a really big creature, I think that's going to be very fun. So next up, we have Ruination Guide, Sog Mauler, and Salt Road Ambusher. So Ruinator Guide is 2 and a blue. Creature Eldrazi Drone with the Void, and ingest. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of his or her library, and then other colorless cards you control get +1/+0. A very nice way to just buff up our manifest tokens and morph creatures. Sog Mauler, 4 green and a blue, trample, hexproof, morph for 3 green and a blue, and it's a 6/6. It's just a nice creature here that you'd love to play for cheaper or get it out there, and you have a nice trample hexproof thing to do whatever you want with. And then Salt Road Ambushers, 3 and a green, creature dog warrior. Whenever another permanent you control is turned face up, if it's a creature, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can megamorph this for 3 green, green, but all we really care about is that first ability. Turning all of our creatures face up is going to make them even bigger. So the last 3 cards we have here are 1,000 Winds, Tide Drifter, and Ugin's Mastery. 1,000 Winds, 4 blue, blue, creature elemental with flying, and morph for 5 blue, blue. But when it is turned face up, return all other tapped creatures to their owner's hands. This is a great board wipe that can be one-sided and really come out of nowhere. So this is very, very powerful, and we can do it for practically free if we can, you know, manifest dread it and then turn it over with Simone. So I love that. Tide Drifter, 1 in a blue, devoid, other colorless creatures you control get +0/+1, which don't knock it, you know. +1 toughness can definitely win through in some games. It's not a lot of buff, but it's enough. And then Ugin's Mastery, 4 generic enchantment. When you cast a colorless creature spell, manifest the top card of your library. We're probably not going to be doing that too often, but the second ability is pretty great, and we're going to be doing this a lot. Whenever you attack with creatures with power 6 or greater, you may turn a face-down creature you control face up. And that is very powerful, allowing us not only to do it with our commander, but now with this. And of course, there's a ton of other really good cards in this deck, and if you want to check that out, please look in the description and see the deck list. I've included all the cards except 2 because they're not quite yet in Scryfall or Archidect. You know, it's very weird. I haven't had this issue before, but these are brand new cards, so, you know, just take that with a grain of salt. But we have Growing Dread, which is one of them, and the other one is Overgrown Zealot. But with that, I would just like to say thank you so much for watching. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Take a look. Is there, you know, a bunch of cards in this deck you're like, these are terrible, I'd never play these? Because honestly, I think that this deck is pretty solid, and I'd be very excited to get this and play it out of the box. But let me know if there's any cards you think would work extra good. I tried to do a little bit of digging and look into those other morph and manifest cards and found some that I thought would work very well. But is there another strategy altogether you would play, or would you even play the co-commander in this deck? Because you have a really cool idea of how to make sure you have the counters on whatever you want when you want it. I would love to hear about that, so please leave it in the comments down below. In addition, if you please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe, that would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Now today's Scryfall card of the day is a Doctor Who Seaside Citadel. Watch for the omens. I declare a new golden age of prosperity for all. The Captain. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.